In this video, I want to graph the following inequalities on a number line and write the answer in interval notation. So here's our first example. -3 is less than x, which is less than 8. So this is different than some of our other inequalities because there are two inequality symbols. And I want you to notice that the numbers go from least to greatest, and I have less than signs in between. This is an example of a compound inequality, and there are really two parts to it. This first example I'm going to break down, and then I'm going to show you a shorter way of doing it. But I want to break it down to explain what is going on. So the first inequality is this one. And that is -3 is less than x. And at the same time, we have another inequality, this one here, that x is less than 8. So what I want to do is I want to graph these on the number line. The two numbers I'm interested in are -3 and 8. So you put -3 to the left of 8, since -3 is less than 8. And now I need to graph this first inequality. This one's a little tricky. It says -3 is less than x. And what a lot of students do is they see -3, they think less than, so they're going to shade to the left. But really, reading it from the x, this says x is greater than -3. Or if I wanted to reverse my inequality, I wanted to write the x on the left and the constant on the right, I have to reverse my inequality symbol. As x is greater than -3, it means I start at the -3 and I want to shade everything going to the right because those are the numbers that are bigger than -3. And if I want to look at x is less than 8, I start at 8, less than numbers are to the left, so I shade everything going to the left of 8 going to -infinity. Those are the two of them graphed individually. Now I have to look at the and statement. It says both have to be true at the same time. So in this region, from -infinity to -3, the only one is true is x is less than 8. In the region when x is greater than 8, only the top line, or x is greater than -3, is true. In this region, both x is greater than -3 and x is less than 8. So I want to shade this whole region in here. So that's looking a little scrappy, so let me just draw myself a number line. I'm going to have -3 and 8. I want to shade everything in between those two numbers. And I have a greater than here, so I'm going to use parentheses on -3. I have a less than for the 8, again parentheses. So this is my graph. Everything shaded between -3 and 8 with two parentheses on the endpoints because they're not included. And so what does my interval notation look like? Parentheses, -3, 8. Parentheses. So there is my interval notation. Now that's the long way of doing it. The shorter way is as long as your numbers go from least to greatest with less thans between them, it means x lies in between these two numbers, and you can just put the two numbers on the number line and shade in between them. It will also work if your numbers go from greatest to least with greater thans, but we normally write it in numerical order like this. So let's look at our next example. Did the numbers go from least to greatest? Yes, -7 is less than -1. And are the inequalities less than or equals to? Yes. So this is an in-between statement. X lies in between -7 and -1. So I'm going to put -7 and -1 on my number line. I'm going to shade everything in between those two numbers. And now on my endpoints, x can equal -7, so -7 is included. We put a square bracket. X cannot equal -1, so I'm going to put a parentheses. So there's my graph, and what does my interval look like? Square bracket, -7, comma, -1, parentheses. Next example, numbers go from least to greatest, and we have less thans or equals to. So this is just another in-between statement. So I'm going to have my numbers 3 and 14 on the number line. I'm going to shade everything in between them. And what do I put on my endpoints? It doesn't include +3. So it's a parentheses, but it can include the 14, so that is a square bracket. So my interval looks like parentheses 3, comma, 14, square bracket. And the last example here is this another between statement. Numbers go from least to greatest. I have less than or equal to's on both of them. So my numbers are going to be -2 and 5. I'm going to shade everything in between them. And they both are less than or equal to, so I'm going to use square brackets on them both. So my interval is square bracket -2, comma, 5, with a square bracket on the 5.